Let's head to South Africa, where the authorities and Correctional Services have defended the decision to release former President Jacob Zuma just over an hour after he arrived in prison. This is the latest twist in the 81-year-old's contempt to court sentence. Correctional Services National Commissioner Makgothi Thobakgale at a briefing in Pretoria says Zuma was let go as part of a remission process aiming to address overcrowding in prison. The former president only served 2 months of a sentence before former Correctional Services boss Arthur Fraser set him free on medical parole.
The former president came in at 6 o'clock and he left after 7 o'clock. And he left after all the administrative processes that were required to be undertaken in line with the criteria that as the National Commissioner have approved of implementing the remission that was approved by the President had been undertaken.
The judgment that states that the former President must come back into the facility, the decision to release him was unlawful, and therefore he must be brought back. So the National Commissioner did inform me about that decision, and the law must take its course. So the law has taken its course with regards to the former President Zuma. The National Commissioner has taken a decision, and that decision was not interfered with, neither did we meddle with it.
Now, joining us live from Kwazulu, Natal in South Africa to discuss this is Dr. Fikile Vilakazi. A warm welcome to you, Dr. Vilakazi.
Good evening to you and to viewers at home. Thank you for inviting me.
Now, Dr. Vilakazi, yet another interesting twist in former President Jacob Zuma's contempt of court ruling. What do you make of the decision today by the Department of Correctional Services to free former President Jacob Zuma after just an hour in custody?
It's a very difficult time in South Africa. I think it's an indictment. I think it's a joke that the president, former President Jacob Zuma, has been treated literally as a special person and almost seen as above the law of South Africa. You know, there are many instances where he has been able to escape the might of the law, and this is one of them. And it's just a coincidence that favors the ruling party, the African National Congress, that the remission decision is meant to start today when the president is meant to return to prison. So I think that the majority of us in the country, of course, are feeling that this is very much a politically orchestrated act. It's a parade of the African National Congress. And unfortunately, that is just how it is. That's the one thing. And I mean, also, you would know that in 2021, we had a situation where in Kwazulu, Natal, we had riots and about 350 people died when former President Jacob Zuma was sent to prison. And that almost really made the country, drove the country into a state of civil war. And I think some of us contest that was just a form of civil war that we've gone through. So it could be that this decision then is also informed by perhaps the current President Cyril Ramaphosa wanting to maintain peace as we are going towards elections, because there were threats that if the president goes back to prison, we may see a repeat of that, perhaps on a larger scale. So there are those things. In the Constitution of South Africa, Section 83 and 84 does give the president powers to be able to make these decisions, but I think it's questionable. It's questionable. Why now? Why today? Why in this hour when former President Jacob Zuma has got to go to prison? And clearly, it's a highly orchestrated political matter more than it is a legal and constitutional decision.
Now, Dr. Vilakazi, the South African Correctional Services has said the reason to release former President Jacob Zuma is because of overcrowding in the prison services. What do you make of this reason given by the Department of Correctional Services? Do you have so many VIP prisoners that you need to decongest the prisons by, letting former President Jacob Zuma walk free? How tenable is this a reason to you?
Honestly speaking, I really think that this is just an insult, to citizens of South Africa, to say that now you have to not make former President Jacob Zuma serve a sentence because there's overcrowding. We've always had problems in prisons of overcrowding, and these have been dealt with in terms of the situation. Former President Mbeki did this decision as well. He freed certain prisons. So this is not the first of its kind. But I think when you talk about prisons of a statue like former President Jacob Zuma, you can see that there's been attempts. After Fraser gave him parole, a number of instances where he escaped the might of the law. So overcrowding is not, I think it's just a scapegoat. It's not necessarily a reason that is enough to tell us that former President Jacob Zuma cannot serve 15 months in prison. He's already served only 2 months. 13 months is not a long period for one to say that we have overcrowding. We've got prisoners in South Africa that are serving life sentences. Why is it that this decision was not taken a month ago, 3 months ago, or a year ago to be able to free spaces in our prisons? And why is it? So there's a coincidence that doesn't make sense. They're telling us, yes, we had a prison, one of the prisons was burnt down here. They lost beds in that prison. It's about 3,000 beds that were lost. And that is not a justification to say that a former president that has been charged with corruption, more than 700 and something cases against his name, is supposed to go to a commission of inquiry where you're spending millions of rands of South Africans to go and account. He refuses to go there, and the court finds him guilty for doing that. And you're saying that he is a less risk prisoner, he is a non-violent prisoner. So how do you calculate risk when millions of South Africans have gone poor? Many people have died of hunger and poverty and destitution because of corruption, where he is highly implicated as a former president. And you're telling South Africans that he can be freed through a process of remission, where you're considering him a lesser in terms of less risk. How do you calculate risk? What about the loss of life that South Africans have experienced? What about many people that are dying of starvation? I can tell you now in South Africa, we've got mothers that are killing their babies because they can't feed them, mainly because of the deteriorating situation in terms of, social needs and being able to just meet your basic needs. People don't know where they're going to get the next plate of food. And then you are saying that a former president that has been charged with corruption, who has failed to report to a commission of inquiry and was sent to jail, which is this sentence that we're dealing with, is a prisoner that is of less risk to society. Please tell me something different. So it's those kinds of things that I think South Africans are questioning, to say, how do you measure a prisoner or an offender that is of risk to society or not?
Thank you.
And that for me is what is at stake here in terms of what the president has done. Has the president calculated what risk means to South Africans in the context of the cases that are allegedly facing the former President Jacob Zuma? And I think that is what we need to be dealing with here.
Thank you so much for your time and insight on this subject, Dr. Fikile Vilakazi. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.